listening to some comment of Mr. Senator McCain describing the Obama administration handling of the Benghazi controversy as a cover-up. I would like to have your feedback about that.
Well, if you could, I was talking to you before the camera and so forth. I've not focused too much on that. That's a news story, breaking story, and I tend to put news reports or reality in a larger context all the time. And I've followed it. It's in the news about the killing of our consul in Benghazi, and I just see it as a political fight between the Democrat and Republican people, particularly from the Republicans, and it doesn't seem of great historic significance to me, but that's the way I see it. I haven't paid much attention to it, to tell you the God's honest truth. I've paid a lot of attention to the country of Libya as it fits into a historical model, and the regime or the rule of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya is another example in the historical context. I'm not terribly familiar with the details of that. It's a fight between the Republicans and the Democrats over who's got political talking points and can get advantage, maybe looking to 2016.
Yeah, many people will not see it that way. They would see it as
no, I know, I understand.
Yes.
It's a fault of mine not paying attention to the kind of news that comes out and has such great import at the moment. But I just tend not to see things that way. I see everything in larger context, even on to understanding everything in an evolutionary, temporal, and then also geographic location context, rather than in the immediate events. There was a thing I could mention to you that came out a couple days after all the hullabaloo about Benghazi and so forth. I know Benghazi. I've been there 3 or 4 times and everything, but in the past. But there was a report that was significant that came out of Libya a day or two. It was reported in Al Jazeera and other systems that I thought had historical questions about the political legitimacy of a particular way in which a country is run. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I don't have any particular take on the importance of the Benghazi issue. It's just a political fight between right and left wing.
Yeah, you even said that some information were removed. Obviously, that there was really it was done on purpose.
Oh well, yeah. There's been that kind of it. That's part of it. And I suppose those kind. And now, when I put a caveat in terms of my own mindset, the way my mind works, and I realize a lot of those things are very important and become very important. One mind goes to, was it important there were some plumbers at the at the Watergate when they were breaking in that led to the impeachment of a president, major change and so forth. And those things are important. And it's also important to give credence to the immediacy of the reporting and the thinking of what's going on. And I don't want to short, most people think that way, but I'm always trying to put it in a larger context. It's just a habit of thought and a way of approaching understanding, and the way, particularly with that country of Libya, with which I'm fairly well acquainted.
Yeah, that's the reason why I want to have your feedback about this. It is also a matter that the political spin hide the truth of Benghazi. There's a lot of things which is not as a
I think it should be left. There'll be political fighting going over that. It'll be back and forth and all that, and then something will come out of it. What Al Jazeera and others reported afterward, that there was another bombing took place, that was only a couple of weeks ago, a week or 10 days ago, and that was done and reported as not being the fighting between like Al Qaeda elements or whatever, or even the tribal rivalries that exist among those people, but it was reported as having been done by the strong supporters of the former head of the country, Muammar Gaddafi. Now, that the supporters of Muammar Gaddafi, which must be legion, given the fact that he got so much income and material sustenance distributed to so many people and did so much for so many people of benefit, there's got to be a whole lot of people that are still in support of him, and that may be a counter-revolution that is in the wind, and I would expect something like that to emerge in the country of Libya. Yeah.
There's so many things that we don't know about the internal situation, that's at the core of it, so to speak.
The core, now, I don't know if you're talking about the Benghazi hullabaloo.
Yes.
Well, I just have nothing much to offer. Wait for things to come out. I just see it as a political fight between the right and left wing of the imperialist American effort in the world. That's all. And their running dog allies.
Yeah. I mean, Senator McCain said that I think the Secretary of State has played a role in this, in that she had to be in the loop in some way.
Yeah, and and as I understand, they were saying, well, it was because of the video, it wasn't because of were they Al-Qaeda, were they Islamicists, or what, and all that. And what they're doing is they're attacking and undermining perhaps Miss Hillary Clinton's run for president in 2016. It's just a political thing by the right wing, and they fight back and forth like children in a kindergarten. You know, in terms of those internal fights. I don't think it has much historical meaning in terms of the ongoing development of human society.
Yeah, but it comes on the surface right now, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it is. It's in the news, and tomorrow there'll be something else in the news, and there'll be fighting. There's over the sequester and all these other kind of things that are going on in terms of the news, and that's mostly what's reported. I don't pay much attention to it as just sort of it's like a pointless painting. It's one dot within a larger painting that you want to see the pattern of. I mean, it's my fault for not being so attuned and malleable to the way the media manipulates the news, or the political classes and the leadership classes manipulate the news and the consciousness of people. My fault for not being readily able to be influenced by the way they present things.
Yeah.
It's propaganda.
Do you think that they start with those four people that got killed, the ambassador and the three others?
The ambassador,
do you think that was the start of the whole procedure, or this attack against Libya? Was that the start of it, or just did it start earlier? Or what was it?
There's always been the Senussi. There's always been that tribal conflict between Gaddafi in the west and Senussi, and there's always Benghazi, that's Serenica. There's a long way. It goes. Tribal differences exist among the people there in the country of Libya. And then it was in 1969 that Gaddafi made the revolution. And as I said in an earlier program with you, when they made that revolution, Libya was probably right at the bottom of the poorest countries in the world. They had a literacy rate of about 5%. That was just before the oil that was due to be discovered. Very rich oil, well positioned, very rich oil positioned to the European market. There was going to be a lot of money, but they were the poorest people. They had literacy of all of the indices of human development were at the bottom, down with Haiti. And that kind of thing. And then in 20 short years or 25 years, all those indices on the internationally kept, human development index, everything went from 5% literacy to 98%.
Wow.
They went from education for everybody, including the women's liberation, women at the university, from 0 practically to 98%. Everybody owning their own home, everybody owning their own automobile, everybody having access to health care, because he took the money and he spread it around.
Yeah.
And he was also a thorn in the side of Western neo-colonial imperialism led by the United States of America. So he was a thorn in the side of the so-called political legitimacy of the American model that most people tend to accept. And for this reason, if the attack had been done by people who were supporters of Muammar Gaddafi, which was reported, Al Jazeera and so forth, this report is starting a counter blast, as it would be McLuhan or James Joyce would call, a counter blast from the people who were supporters, who have to be legion in Libya, having benefited so very much by the incredible rise in a short 25 years of the living standard of everybody in that country, and also we support from the poor people and the oppressed people around the world, which is characteristic of all the world. They have great outreach of support for him as a revolutionary leader in historic terms. And that's something that's significant. And I think there's going to be a resurgence of the people who are support of Muammar Gaddafi, and the fact that NATO and the United States attacked him and killed him. because he was a threat to the imperialist ambitions of the American political class.
The attack, when those 4 people that got killed, I think it's something that went very wrong. It didn't. I don't think it was meant to kill them, but I think it's the whole.
You're talking about Benghazi again?
Yeah, Benghazi. That's only I think that's initiated of something that's.
Well, that could have been. There are various groups, and in anything where you get.
It went very wrong. Very wrong.
Well, in terms of the defense of the consular office, that's the question. It's a big question that confronts the State Department. They have to have some sort of protection for the people, but. I mean, there were attacks in Kenya and in Tanzania. There's been a lot of attacks. Consular offices, particularly, are very vulnerable. And there's a great deal of hatred, deep-seated hatred among people of the world directed at the United States of America, as there was great hatred directed against the rule of Rome when Rome ruled with an iron hand as the politically so-called legitimate order of the day from, for 1,000 years. What I'm saying,
know history very well.
No, just patterns and a little bit, and you had that. And so he represented perhaps questioning the premises that are being questioned sub rosely in the United States now about what's happening. Is the United States of America, the model of the United States of America, coming into question at a systemic level? That they have questioned, they have assumed political legitimacy of the system they started in 1776 that is proving to be inadequate to what the present requires, because new possibilities emerge historically through time. You had Rome for 1,000 years in Europe, then you had 1,000 years of rule by the hereditary families. That was called political legitimacy. The king and the dukes and the earls, and they had a whole system that gave a sense of political. They even had, it got down to the divine right of kings, and you still got, and then you had a revolution made because of the development. Adam Smith, the steam engine, the Industrial Revolution, changes were coming across the Atlantic Ocean. It was a revolution made against the feudal order of feudal Europe. But those things you still got people, they still got a Queen of England from feudal times. They've still got, Prince Henry's visiting now, and they fall down, they still give credence to the Count and all the things that helped, and that was being challenged by a small country of people outside the influence of the established way of doing things, which had been 1,000 years in Europe by and large, and it was challenged by the United States of America. And they managed to win at Yorktown and that sort of thing.
That's part of history.
Pardon?
That's part
of history.
Yeah.
And you'll note also that they won, and then what came back, the British still came back with their assertion of their legitimacy against the legitimacy of another group of white men, landowners, who set up another political system here called the United States of America. And they came and they re-attacked. It was about the same with Libya. Libya set up a system that challenged the basic premises, economic and political organization, that the United States had set up in answer to the feudal order coming out of 1,000 years after Rome.
Yeah,
it's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And what he set up could be a model for what we're groping for now. So in a sense, coming from whole cloth, as they say, he set up a principle of organizing a society that was in advance historically of what we are saying is legitimate. So, and the British came and burned Washington to the ground in 1812. They came back with their, so it would be like us going down and overthrowing Libya, because it could be, because he set an example relevant to the historical needs of the moment now. He was ahead of history's curve, and they were attacking in the same way King George or the British would attack us in 1812, because we're overthrowing the basis of their political legitimacy, and they were all advanced and so forth in their thinking and their infrastructure and everything like that, just as we are. But that, I think he was much more of a threat at an ideological level to the current system that's falling apart.
Yeah, let me ask you, you knew him, I mean, you knew a lot about him because you met him and all that, but the people who didn't like him in his country, do you think those people were related to Al-Qaeda or to other organizations, terrorist organizations?
Well, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Because in fact he did good things generally for the people.
Well, it seems that way when you go from 5% literacy to 96, and you go, everybody had health care, everybody had that. He spread it around for the poor people.
Yeah.
And he's got an example for the poor people of the world, which is the mass of the people are not served well when the political class is ruling, is taking care of only those who are very well set. Do you understand? That's the pattern of world history. And he had the black community in the United States that lived under apartheid loved Gaddafi. The American Indian nations that have been overthrown by force of arms love Muammar Gaddafi. The poor people of Africa, the various people on the ground, huge numbers of people, love the memory of Muammar Gaddafi. I think he's going to be emerging as a martyred saint of setting up a system relevant to the future, as the United States was relevant to the future after coming out of the rule of feudalism in Europe. That's the point.
Very strong point, yes.
And the fact that this attack that came just 2 or 3 days ago was done by former supporters, of which there has to be many in Libya, maybe having to hold their peace or something like that, because he's fighting like mafia dons. The north side of Chicago, the south side, they're fighting for territory and fighting for money, and there's money in the oil and all that.
Yeah, of course.
But that kind of, and it's in accord with the interests of the ruling power. It would be Rome in the time of the Roman Empire, or the United States, and the running dog allies within they want to establish a political base, and they haven't been able to do it in Africa, the United States, or NATO. They want to establish. First thing he did was he made them leave Willis Air Force Base when he took over power in 1769. So that's what I'm saying. He was ahead of history's curve, perhaps. Now, the system in place works. It's important. It's got real meaning, but it's being challenged fundamentally on the order of economic organization and political organization. He set up a system that was in advance, not being tied to the old order that's being proclaimed by the United States, but being more a tabula rasa, to set up a system that could challenge, just like we challenged the feudal order of Britain and Europe. If you can understand.
Oh yeah, no, I understand. That's what you're saying. It's historical. I mean, it's historical stuff.
Well, it isn't understood by hardly anybody, because they assume the United States of America is politically legitimate. It may be undercut, and the running dog allies of them, which is virtually the entire developed world. They're all having the same problem. They're being confronted by them economically now. They do not have a system of forming capital or of distributing demand and justice within the world.
What's going to happen now over there in Libya?
I don't know, darling. I don't know. I just think there's going to be a redevelopment of the peoples that were in support of him.
Yeah. Do they have a strong man to take over? Do you have somebody to?
No, I thought it would have been safe, his son, but of course they were overthrown like a mafia hit.
Yeah.
And also he didn't have a lot of military thing. He was trusting in the people. Yeah. Because he did have, as far as I could tell, in the 8 or 9 times I was there, he had support of a lot of people in that country. And then you had special interests that were fed by CIA, DIA, people like that, and they were engineered a coup against him. And he didn't. And then once you get, free fire zone like they're trying to call for in Syria now, and so forth, that's another. And so that's this. But I think there's going to be worldwide appreciation of him. Just the same as if they had managed to kill George Washington in 1776, he still would have lived as a model, or Jefferson.
It will be that way,
Jefferson.
Yes.
Yeah. Or
I think you.
Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
It's going to be the discovery. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be on the surface.
When the story comes out about what he tried to do, what he tried to do and did, he set up a participatory democracy, where people all had a place to go and they'd meet, like town hall meetings for the whole damn country would meet, and they'd discuss the issues and take.
Interesting.
And he set up a system where he did not cotton in on the labor theory of value, that all the assets could be owned by one people, and he had signs everywhere. Partners, the capital should be formed in a way where the people own the capital assets of the structure. We don't have that. We have a plutocracy. A very highly concentrated plutocracy, in the West. We don't. We only distribute it according to labor, and labor is being undercut by automation and all these things. And Keynes said that's a thing structurally built in. We don't have an answer because our institutions are all tied into a system that's out of date, systemically. His system would have been relevant to a future that's emerging.
Yeah, it was a quota system, yes.
In my way of thinking. Now, that's not popular or anything, but that's the way I see it.
Very few countries have this kind of a...
I don't know of anyone.
Chavez, in his own way, was doing something similar.
Well, Chavez is more of a Marxist kind of thing, and traditional social. Yeah, all right, but that's through the government.
Yes.
But he was not a Soviet or Marxist-oriented ideology. Gaddafi, that's what was unique. He wasn't China. No. He wasn't Soviet Union. He had a unique system that allowed for the private sector, but just said the private sector capital assets should be owned by everybody as a way of distributing demand. That's what the world cries for, and we don't have it.
He was independent.
So for that, both politically, with people's congresses, with sovereignty based in people's congresses, it would be like the whole country met like a town hall meeting. And that's where sovereignty was. So the idea that we have is setting up a representative democracy like we've done, and seems the only way to have it, a political system set. He had it there at the level so people couldn't understand it. It's like the royal families of Europe couldn't understand what the hell are these people across the ocean talking about democracy for. We got the king. We got the divine right of king. We have a system. It's legitimate. It's been there 1,000 years. So that kind of attitude is what the leaders of the world now have toward anybody who would question the idea, the political, long-term, historical, evolutionary relevance of the system in place that is called politically legitimate.
Ahead of his time.
No, there's something ahead of the time, and it will come from places that are not all. The less you're connected in the way of the historically inherited pattern, the easier it is for you to, out of whole cloth, build a new system. And that principle goes out to thinking not only in terms of political organization, of social organization, that goes out to the evolutionary process itself of which we're a part. The emerging of new species and so forth. So if you put things in a larger context, I think he's going to emerge as a martyr and as a hero.
Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely.
And the fact that plaque that came a few days after that squabble with Al-Qaeda-minded people or somebody else like that at Benghazi fighting over whatever, what's going on in Syria. Same kind of thing being done in Syria now. When that's done, but that thing that Attacl where they announced, it was former supporters of Muammar Gaddafi. And that's going to get international support from people that are minded, thinking toward justice or historical questions of the ideas and the means by which the human organization is going to be realized. He was an example of that. It wasn't perfect, but it was a try in that direction.
Now, our show is dwindling down to only have a few minutes left.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, Miss Sorry. I love when because you're explaining something that's very, very interesting.
It wouldn't be very popular in this country.
Maybe not.
Oh.
But a lot of people are going to like it, I'm pretty sure of it. I'd like to have your advice about what you think the government should do in this particular case to straighten up the situation.
Which case? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Are you back again to about the Benghazi?
Yes, I'm back again to that because it's done. You can't that's it. What should the government do in this particular case? What would you think? What would be your opinion about that?
You're talking about the attack that killed the consular office, the consul in Benghazi. I really don't know. It's going to emerge. It's a political football. It's a political, and then there is growing up Al-Qaeda. He warned against that. That's what Mr. Gaddafi warned against that. And there's a great deal of resentment against the West, and particularly the United States. We engineered that, so that's taking a different form. Then you've got the relationship with Iran. We've got, I see Nawaz Sharif won in Pakistan, the presidential election, he won that. There's a great deal of opposition to the assumed legitimacy of the United States, the model for the world, good for all of history. The crowned heads of France came to call it the divine right. They linked to God in order to give the divine right of the king. And what are you talking? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that there is the need, and I think it's widely felt among the people, we need something new. We need something that will challenge the plutocratic organizational structure led by the example coming out of the Enlightenment and all of that kind of thing in the institution set up and established and reified in our institutions, even given, they pledge allegiance to it all the time, and what it was just another group of white men who were fighting about who's going to have the right to exploit the people. They had slaves, the women, and all the rest of it. It wasn't some big thing. But now we're going through a moment of real qualitative transformation. The world, I think, feels that at a deep level. And one of the examples that's going to emerge, I would think, as a lodestar, will be the example that was set by Muammar Gaddafi. As difficult as it was for him to try and do that against all the forces of imperial Western colonial attitude that they had from 1,000 years of having rule.
He did succeed for quite a long
time. At the end,
40 years he was always 40,
well,
41.
He came to power in September 1 of 1969 in a bloodless coup.
It's but so would you do something personally? Could you do something? Is it?
I would like to do things to celebrate his memory.
Yeah.
Anything I could do, or because I think that he had the kernels of something very important. That's my own feeling.
Yeah.
It's not popular.
No.
Because we have had propaganda directed against him.
Yeah.
Because he was a threat to the interests of the established political class.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do we keep
should be an ambassador over there?
No, hardly. I don't think so. No, it's not that.
Be a revolution.
Well, a revolution is called for, in my view, in terms of a major qualitative change, and I think we're reaching for it. One of the best places to find something along those lines might be MNN. It's got a
Our channel, my guest, and it is wonderful to have you again.
It's good to be here with you.
Part 2 of my show, and we had a very interesting conversation previously, and I would like to continue this
fine, whatever you want,
topic:
Josie.
Benghazi terrorist attack or cover-up. We're back again to the same thing, the same topic.
Okay.
Now. They say that the Benghazi syndrome is a grave malady of the noggin, the symptoms of which are compulsion to grossly exaggerate matters and to compare almost anything to Watergate.
Oh, it's funny. I had brought up Watergate, hadn't I? Just subliminally or yeah. Okay, they will try to do that to make a big thing. It was. I remember Watergate. Do you remember that?
Sure.
I can remember. I used to do a lot of programs in Washington. We would often go to the restaurant across from the Watergate, and I loved the Gump movie where he's there at the Watergate, and there's some people with flashlights, and it was just nothing, and then it led to the impeachment. So that would be the ideal for a political group, to get the other person who's in a position of authority to have to step down and win. It's a political fight that goes on.
Yeah, that's what you
but
compare
again,
to that, yes.
I would think it's mostly the Republicans, and they're probably trying to undercut the Democrats' ability to win the presidential election, and they're looking at 2016, and it's political maneuvering is the way I see it,
Al-Qaeda or members of Congress?
Al-Qaeda or members of, I don't understand that.
Well, I'm reading it all things, so you're getting more. From a fair reading of the clashing emails, remember the situation was a question about those emails that were
right.
who the fanatical enemy was. Al-Qaeda or members of the Congress?
Well, that came to be down to where they were. Susan Rice, right, was
Yes,
saying that it was because of a video that had been published that got everybody incensed and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So they're trying to
She did
say
a lot
that.
of,
And they were saying that there was an election. It was during an election, and they were just protecting their electoral rights, the executive branch and everything, by spinning things in a certain kind of way and get their talking points to protect their own, underbelly and all that kind of stuff. So I really don't know. As far as Al-Qaeda, I don't know what the context, I haven't been there in a long time, I don't know what the context of the people fighting in Libya now is, and what the forces are. There are all these tribal forces that are important in terms of their identity that still hold to a large degree, and I know that's part of it. And also, we spoke earlier, the earlier program, about the fact that one doesn't question just, cavalierly the assumption that the institutions that we live by are outdated. I mean, it's easy to say, but the system does work in a degree. We did have a depression, we've had depressions and so forth. I'm talking now on a world scale. It does work, and things get done, and you don't just cavalierly overthrow something without having something to put in its place. And one should respect the fact that, airplanes fly, trains go, things run on time, buses come, things get done, some people are served, and all that sort of thing. So you don't cavalierly talk about that kind of a change.
No, as a matter of
So
fact,
the Al-Qaeda, I'm not sure exactly what they want. And then always be aware, Vance Packard and the ability of influencing the human consciousness, playing upon emotions and that kind of stuff. It's called propaganda. It's very powerful, particularly now in an age of media. But do have respect for the system, because the system that's going to be replaced should be has to be, this is the ultimate challenge, it has to be subsumed historically and included people who represent that. But we don't have, because the intellectual community is all divided up into specialization where they can't talk to one another. We don't have, what we lack is vision overall in terms of the moment of evolutionary terms of the evolution of events in this universe. So Al-Qaeda, they say they want to go back to the 3rd century or 6th, 7th century or something, but...
Referring to propaganda, the UN ambassador Susan Rice linked the Benghazi assault to the internet video.
Yeah, that's what she tried to do, and then yes, that and that the charge, I guess, is by the Republicans, McCain and so forth, is that they were doing that for political advantage, to make sure that something didn't come up that would prove detrimental to the election possibilities of Mr. Obama. It's political maneuvering.
Yeah, in fact, it was a success for the terrorists and a disaster for the Americans.
Well,
the States.
it was a yeah, and if it had been supporters of who did that were supporters of Muammar Gaddafi, it's not their way. But if it had been, then that would have been historically significant. But I don't think, or maybe that's too cavalier. But I'm back again to the thing that he will be seen in a different light historically. He was propagandized against and everything. But what Al-Qaeda, and it is a focus of the resentment against the assumed legitimacy everywhere of the American, more or less, model that we have developed and has become the model that is relevant in the world in terms of the way it is set up, which benefits, as always the models have in all of history, a few people, relatively few people at the very top. And we can see things moving that way now systemically, to where all the resources and everything is going to benefit the few people at the top, including now the banks and the political class. And they're bought and paid for by the people and the hedge fund people who have all the money, and it's all going to them. So it's coming to a structural moment where our system of organization, both politically and in terms of economic theorizing or the structure, isn't working. And so that's on a world scale. And I'm not sure where a lot of the resentment comes from the Islamic part of the world in an organized way. It could be a threat to the assumed legitimacy of the pattern that we say is legitimate. It's not legitimate, it's just another moment in history where a power group took over, could establish themselves for a while, and then something new is needed. So what we're looking for is something new. And again, if you have something in place where people have their identity wrapped up in the institutions, and the more you're ensconced within that historical pattern, the same thing applies to evolution in terms of a steady state system for a system that comes and then there's a new development. But that I don't know where the Al-Qaeda, except that is they're dropping they're having drones all over Pakistan. I don't know, 90% of the people in Pakistan hate the United States of America for coming there with their drones, and we're doing it with impunity.
Because of the terrorism.
Yeah. Well, no. That's what we say.
Yeah.
But it's really asserting American authority and American system essentially on the world for the interest of the people that represent the leadership plutocratic element. And that leadership element and the thing they're doing and the way they're developing do not have a pattern that is going to be able to serve the whole of the world. And it's becoming pretty obvious it's only for the benefit of the relatively few. It gets larger when you get into a real sizable middle class that can happen, but that's being undercut even in the center of the universe, in the center of the empire, is centered on the Potomac. So anyway, I'm getting a scan. But we ought to keep in mind that we have to subsume that inherited system, not overthrow it. Now they want to overthrow it and get some sort of a chaos. We don't want that. But what we need is leadership on a world scale, intellectual leadership that can take into account everything, one that could be liberating of the people. He went from the poorest people in the world to just about certainly the most affluent and well taken care of people in about 25 years with a pattern that's worth paying some attention to rather than just overthrowing, because it doesn't serve the interest of some oil company or something. You understand? I mean, I'm talking Gaddafi now. That's important. That was an important term.
We're going back and forth to that then, because you come back to this, which is what I want to hear. But also on this particular case, the Obama hasn't come clear on a Libyan consulate attack. It wasn't. The whole situation is not clear why it happened, how it happened. There are different stories about the whole thing.
Yeah, you're getting reported stories, I guess. Behind it, I think, is just the political maneuvering of the Democratic and Republican parties. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, what the talking points, what the story is, but you're, okay. And to tell you the truth, I can't address it very well because I don't pay much attention to the details that are coming out from the various sides until give it a little time to shake out and find out what really happened. There's lots of reasons for resentment. As I say, what would have been significant if those were supporters of Muammar Gaddafi that attacked and killed an American for having killed him. Now that would be meaningful. But the fact that they're just fighting among themselves, or that there are people that are in opposition to the United States, being the leadership element of a system that they see as being outdated, and so forth, and that's part of the world pattern. And it's not only the Islamic world; it's the larger world that is not well served by a system that you can see the concentration of the wealth in the world is just becoming obscenely at the top.
Would you call it a political circus?
Well, I don't know if it's circus. I don't want to be cavalier because the system does work, and people do get their identity, and they have these things about the middle class, and that people, and there was a growth of that for a long time in this country after the Second War and all of that. So you have a model that has worked for serving a number of people, and that's the model they're trying to have for the world and everything, but it's being undercut by the technologically advancing automated systems that are becoming relative to the productive process, the labor theory of value that informed Marxism and other kinds of left-wing socialist systems didn't work in the Soviet Union. You ended up without private property. He had a system that you had private property vouchsafed, private sector, but the ownership of the assets. And everywhere in Libya they had signs, partners, not wage earners. He called wage earners slaves.
So
that they're slaves to the people
If they have field and all that, it was their own. If they would.
Yeah, if they were farming, but I mean industrial things, industrial production. You go, and all the assets are owned in the Western so-called legitimate world. What do we got? 8 banks? And they own, and they're just getting overwhelmingly wealthy. They own all this money. They crash the economy. They are completely bailed out. Nobody has any answer for that. You get 14 million families foreclosed upon, very often illegally, and they just get away with it. So it's like the barons were getting, the aristocracy of feudal times were just totally sacrosanct in their castle, because they had the power to assert themselves. So that system is not, they don't have a vision of a liberated order that the times and the future requires. For in a new, different, I mean, even beyond all of the political changes that have gone on historically, culturally. But what we're going through now is we're coming into a whole new way, almost evolutionarily, coming to the end of the human experience in a very real sense. I mean, there's reasons for things.
Yes.
There's a movement now that's very good, transhumanism. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
That's a very important movement. That involves a whole lot of people who are thinking about things very comprehensively, not only politically, but on the evolutionary stand.
Yeah.
We're coming to the point with the weapons by which realpolitik is asserted by our political leaders. Whoever's got the gun can conquer. And you better well get in the stocks and become a slave. But people don't want to be like sheep. They don't want to be that's another thing. True. People want to have security with the family and all, and that's fair enough. But it's not trickling down. No. And there's systemic change that is needed that is not included within the canon of thinking of our political or even our intellectual leadership, has been subverted by specialization on various fields that divides and conquers the whole process of understanding what's going on, rather than having pattern recognizing capability by your leadership element in the world. He provided a model that was worthy of study in terms of the future, not reifying the past. But as to the Al-Qaeda, I just don't know, except it's a expression of a hatred of the West, I think, by a lot of the people of the world, justifiably so.
Yeah, it's a classic Benghazi syndrome. There is no known cure.
Well, I don't see where. Libya was a model that you could have repaired to and have a futurist context that related to the poor of the world, the poor of the world, the underclasses of the world, in a way that's relevant. And it was a thing that did not do away with private sector or with private property, as would a Marxist, a full-fledged Marxist or socialist thing, like they just did away with the private property in the Soviet Union. It all became nomenclatural, and there was no competition or anything. But in China's done that politically. They have all the power. Well, they have all the power. But there's an awful lot. There's 300 million people have done pretty well in Shanghai and Beijing, but you got 1 billion people out in the West, particularly, that are living on $1 a day still, don't forget. Yeah. So the poor people of the world are still there, and there's not systems that are going to be able to serve their needs without dealing with some way of bringing private sector ownership of capital assets, that is technology that's creating the wealth increasingly, into the hands of the general society as a means not only of forming capital to allow us to do what we're technologically capable of doing, but distributing buying power to the people by something other than their labor. They're like, he used to call them wage slaves. If you're paid a wage, you're a slave to the people who actually own the assets, and that's true. Yeah. And it's just assumed that's the only way it can be. And that's the biggest problem confronting us, and he had a solution to that.
But he needs a strong man to can take over what he started, what he did.
Well, a strong man, that's the history of the.
Who's a strong man in Libya? Who is a strong man in Libya?
I don't know. They've got a bunch of conflicting groups there, interest groups. Probably a lot of them backed by American companies and all that. They've opened it up and everything like that to divide and conquer. The country has always, it's a neo-colonial attitude by the Europe, toward that area, and they were able to pull it off, and that kind of thing. That's all it is cut down and propagandized against it because he was really effectively challenging it.
When you were in Libya, did you have the opportunity to visit some of the areas? Like
Oh yeah, I've been all over. I've been there. That's the only country I've been interested in my adult life because I think they were unique. It was private sector, public sector. He saw wage earners as slaves. It's you know, you're a slave to the rich guys who own everything, and they own all the assets. And and I went and visited all parts of the country, and I was there maybe 6 or 7 times. We had to be smuggled in because they was a terrorist or something. But you had the best people in the world would gather. Stokely Carmichael and I used to go. We had a wonderful time. There'd be the people who represented the poor people. You see? Now the poor people are they don't care about the poor people, the political class running the world. They don't care about the poor. All they talk about is middle class or something like that. And there's something to be said for that. But that he really did. And he had a following all over the world. Evo Morales got along well. Chavez, Ecuador, the people that are going on. And this thing is shaking up the world. They don't have a system that the future requires. They only are reestablishing the outdated institutions inherited from 1776.
Are you not afraid of communism?
No, I'm not afraid of communism. I don't think communism is proven to be. Communism is too one-sided. What they did, well, in my view, I mean, I've never been a Marxist or something. You could understand and read a lot of it and everything. The surplus value of labor, they're all tied up in the labor theory of value, that everything's created by labor. But that's being undercut by technological automation, not only information technology, but robotics. Hans Moravec at Carnegie. You know, it's not only the information, you know, with the computers and the exponential increasing of capability, creating all this equipment or information, but also robotics. They're coming in monumental proportion, so that everything mass produced is being done by machines. They can do it. You see on the Science Channel, everything is being made by machines. The people are standing there watching it, and then they're saying the only way to distribute demand through the people so they can buy what can be built. Mr. Ford had to have somebody turning the nuts. But now it's being done, and they still allow for, in the Soviet Union, they just did away with private property. Everything became the nomenclatura. You got a fascistic kind of ownership, power of all political, all state. You got to have both. You got to have some tension between the two, but the private sector can't run away with it in a fascistic way. You got to have a combination, and you got to recognize that there's a new productive capability emerging where we may be successful for everybody and the ecology in a way that's never been available to us in the past. So it's beyond just a political change from, you know, one group of people, white men doing something, and another group of white men doing something, establish their win, like The Godfather, as something, winning a war, or something historical, one interest group after another. It's something that has to take in the whole, and it calls for a whole new change, and all those movements are going exponential. So it's like coming to not only the end of history, that Mr. Fukuyama said, that's worth taking into account, but it's coming to the end of a period where the fighting, legitimacy was established, realpolitik, called realpolitik, Haushofer, that power and legitimacy comes from whoever's got the biggest club, can hit the other one on the head and conquer, and rape, and steal, and do whatever they want. And that's the history of the world, and the political legitimacy is still vested that way. Whoever's got the weapons can conquer and can win.
It's always been like that.
It's always been like that. So, but now the weapons have become species lethal. Mr. Lifton, we aired a program today. It is true. The weapons that exist, a Trident submarine. You can't believe they got 8 of these things. They got 35 nuclear things. They could wipe out every city. One submarine could wipe out every city in Europe. Wow. Completely obliterated. All right?
Terrible.
No. It's reached a point where the old way of establishing political authority or legitimacy is through the end of a gun. The British can conquer India with the Gatling gun. because they got the power to do it. But that's no, you got to have the ideas of how you're going to organize it. We don't have that. So we don't lack it. The thing we're saying is legitimate for the history of the world. Pardon?
We should think about survival, not destruction.
Not only survival, but transcendence of scarcity, transcendence of injustice.
Yeah.
We have a time where we have a capability we've never had in history of taking care of everybody and the ecology. And that's something that calls for a new way of thinking. So you want to look for some place where there's new way. That was one important way, Libya. And it's going to emerge, I think, as an example. I keep getting back to that. So
yeah, no,
the Al-Qaeda represents...
That's the topic of our conversation. It's a true thing. And the whole thing defies logic when you think of it.
Well, maybe the existence of maybe Josane, every time I wake, almost every day when I wake up, I'm amazed that anything exists. Anything exists. I mean, it's amazing that all the elements and everything exists in the evolution, and all the creatures and my dog and the birds and everything exists, and human beings and thought and evolution. And we may be coming to the end of 200,000 years of Homo sapien evolution.
I hope not.
No.
I hope we're wise enough to.
No. We should be thinking about a change that's it's too small to think about a little political change. We're arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, or something like that. It's just political. That's the news. That kind of thing. We should be thinking at the end, at the minimum, it's coming to the end of a historical context that is being and calling for a qualitative. So that's like in evolution, it's called punctuated equilibrium. You have steady state. We've had steady state for 200,000 years. We had steady state when we were contained within Homo habilis before we emerged. And so we should think about the change that's before us in beginning of an evolutionary qualitative transformation of our relationship to the universe. A liberated condition that is possible.
Our show is dwindling down to only a very, very short few minutes left. Not at all. I'm not. I'm delighted to have you here.
Yeah.
If you had the power, what would you do?
Support MNN and support public access television and support autodidactic learning and get really good programming out to the greatest number of people and distribute it as widely as possible without having to sell out in order to do it.
Yeah.
And to get comprehensive thinking rather than specialized thinking that is undercutting the intellectual community academically and so forth. There should be a department on every university of everything, rather than dividing it all down. They divide and conquer the nations of Africa as a way of getting control. They have divided and conquered the intellectual community into such specialization they can't think anything about the little thing they're concentrated. There should be a thing where it's systems, pattern recognizing thinking. They should make documentaries that can be done with really good graphics and bring it down and get rid of writing. Get rid of all the writing and get
writing by hand.
Writing, yeah, getting rid and have it all over. They should have a thing. They had a thing, the history of the world in 2 hours on a science channel. I don't think there's one written word. You could put all they'd have to do is be able to talk and be able to listen, and you could educate them without going through all the things that we call education. So those are a few of the things. Educational, and I think the most important thing is public access, where citizens can do that and have access to. That's one of the most important revolutionary possibilities before us now, and I'm very happy to be one of the humble members of Manhattan Neighborhood Network production. I think it's really important, and it could be an example for systems like that across the nation and across the world.
Yeah. You remember there was a man who did give all those laptops to those children? I mean, thousands and thousands of them.
$100 laptop?
Yes,
they should get it. I couldn't agree with you more. Just get a laptop in everybody's hands. You could do it. Billions of dollars for battleships and things. What they could do is get
educate them. Yes.
And so there's hope in that. Yes. But we need to have a system.
There's still people today who can't read and write. You know that.
I beg your pardon?
There's still people today, adults, who cannot read and write.
Well, I wouldn't bother about that. Well, as long as you can talk.
You have to.
No, you don't have to. No, we're getting out of the Gutenberg out. I bet you there'll be no more books after about 20 years from now. There will not be books. All you have to do is know how to talk, and then you can access information. That can be taught at your mother's knee. You don't have to have anybody teach you. You can teach yourself. But anyway, there's a lot of thinking.
You have a lot of projects, the good ones.
Pardon?
You have a lot of good projects.
Well, a lot of things to talk about. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with economics, doesn't it?
Yeah, mostly the economics, because that's related to money.
Anyway, I'm sorry I got off on a tangent. But
No, not at all. It was all related to him and with Attacl, and also the economy, and then that's related to that. In fact, we did very good. I like the way it went on.
You do?
Yes, very much
Good.
so. Very
Okay,
much so. Very much so. Very much so. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It was glad.
Thank you.
I'm looking
Thank
forward to
Richard.
see it on the. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, M&N. Thank you, George Stoney.